All right, so I was going to show you a sample prompt for the foundational writing assignment for component 1C. But sometimes I have a moment of illumination and I decide to switch things up. So what we're going to do now instead is I'm going to show you this after I give you the example. So I was going to give you this and then the examples of how you combine the foundational writing assignment prompts with the argument lesson, but the problem with that is that you have to get all this new information on top of the argument lesson that I just gave. What I'd like to do is be a little bit more narrow in our focus and stick to talking just about arguments. I think that this is pedagogically better. It's better for your learning. So just know that this might differ a little bit from what I originally thought I would do as articulated in the course schedule, but you're still getting everything that you need. So let's continue. This is still component 1A. I'm just doing things a little bit differently within 1A. So let's go ahead and look at some sample responses. Don't forget what I said at the beginning of the video, that it doesn't matter what the topic is. You'll get the topic specific to your class, ethics or intro, later in another component. Focus on the lesson, the argument lesson. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what I have labeled as an incorrect response. So this one says, we should not reopen elementary schools for on-campus learning. Okay, so that is a statement right there. Then we've got another statement. This is something a lot of parents are thinking about. Then we have a third statement. The news is definitely shaping opinion on this matter. We have a fourth statement. One thing is for sure, only time will tell how many people get sick of COVID. All right, so we need to go back to the checklist, because the checklist captures what's the big deal with the checklist? It captures all of the necessary ingredients, a complete list of ingredients that something must have in order to count as an argument. So do I have at least two statements in this response? Yes, so we can check that off. Is there at least one statement that attempts to support another one, is true or plausible? Is a reason given for anything? If we look at this, there is no statement that offers any attempt to support another. Now, one thing I need to go ahead and say is that in all of the examples that I'm going to be working through with you, the conclusion, there is a conclusion is supposed to be stated first in the paragraph. And I'm doing that because, as I said, that's what I want in your foundational writing assignment topic responses. Your conclusion will come first. So if this is supposed to be a conclusion, and the student was supposed to give me reasons after statement 1 in support of the conclusion, we see that none of the statements 2, 3, or 4 give me any reasons to believe that statement 1 is true or plausible. They might be, statements 2, 3, and 4 might be contextually relevant, topically relevant to statement 1, but they're not logically relevant from the standpoint of the discipline of logic itself. So we're using the philosophical branch of logic to think about arguments and how we construct them and make sure that we have them. From the standpoint of logic, a branch of philosophy, 2, 3, and 4 do nothing to support, to try to justify the belief or the claim that is in statement 1, that it's true or at least plausible. They're more, like I said, contextually, they're related to a more general topic, that is reopening schools, but 2, 3, and 4 do not function as direct support for statement 1. As such, and you should write this over here, no reasons are given in support of any other statement, okay? Assuming statement 1 is supposed to be a conclusion, no statement offers any kind of support to convince us that it's true or false. So this would be an incorrect response because it is not an argument insofar as we're looking at what we want to see in the foundational writing assignment. Okay, so if you have extra time, you know that you have the time, you could practice numbering and bracketing the statements but on your own before I do it, but you're going to have a lot of practice with coaching videos to do that when we get later into the semester, around weeks 3 or 4. So if time is of the essence, I wouldn't practice doing that. But if you happen to have a lot of time, maybe you don't have to work or have any kids, why not practice bracketing and numbering in pencil and correcting on your own later. This could actually help you, especially if you are challenged with your writing skills. Okay, so this is a correct response with some problems. Okay, let's go ahead and bracket number 1. I have concluded that we should reopen elementary schools. So there is a statement right here at this part of the sentence. In this sentence, we actually have 2 statements. You can have any number of statements in a single sentence. So the second statement occurs after because. So here we have 2. Children are not learning social skills when having to just sit and do work in front of a computer. Okay, so that's statement 2. So you might want to write that down as a warning. A sentence can have any number of statements. You could have just 1, 2, 3. In theory, you could have 100. It'd be hard to follow that sentence, but it could have 100 statements. Okay, so let's go on. So it says, but people have their own opinion on the matter. Okay, so we've got 3, which really technically begins with people. Okay, people have their opinion on the matter. It is really just a matter of opinion. It's up to the parent to decide what is in their child's best interest. Okay, so a couple of things that are problematic. 2 and 4 merely just repeat each other, right? And what are they about? It's just saying that people have opinions about a topic. What does that have to do with supporting the conclusion that we should reopen elementary schools? 2 and 4 telling me that people have opinions about that does nothing to argue for to try to show that statement 1 is true or plausible. Let's look at statement 5. It's up to the parent to decide what is in their child's own best interest. That's about who the decision-making lies with respect to, children, right? What is the statement 1 about? It's about reopening elementary schools. Statement 5 does not, let me turn off my phone here because my Ring device keeps going off. Statement 5 also does not do anything to support the truth or accuracy or plausibility of statement 1. As such, that is an issue. So 3, 4, and 5 play no strictly logical role to play, at least from the philosophical standpoint of philosophy and our definition of argument. Now, let's not forget our checklist. I really should have started with that. Does this have at least 2 statements in the response? So are there at least 2 statements? Yes, there's 5, but as we saw, 3, 4, and 5 do not function as reasons. And we know that the second item in our checklist is that there must be at least 1 statement that attempts to support another one as true or plausible or accurate. So, as it turns out, this response here, this is not an argument, by the way. It's a response, it's a paragraph, but it's not an argument. This response here is an argument because it does have at least 2 statements, and at least one of the statements offers reasons for thinking something is true or plausible. So you already know that I said that each statement, that if something is an argument in a response, the first one will be the what? The conclusion. And in fact, this person made it really transparent that they're giving a conclusion, or that they think they're giving a conclusion, by using a conclusion indicator. I have concluded that. You might want to use that, and that's fine. I do tell you to copy and paste certain statements for your conclusions. You'll see what I mean by that later. But you could add something like this. This will actually help you in the future. It will make future assignments easier for both you and your peers. So I have concluded that we should reopen the elementary schools. And then look at this word because. You're going to learn more about something called conclusion indicators and reason indicators. Because typically tells us that a reason is coming. And if you can use the word appropriately with good grammar and good syntax, I highly encourage you to use what are called reason indicators. You can look those up. You can Google them. Google reason indicators. Another word for reason is premise. We'll start to use the word premises later in the semester in addition to reasons. So you could also look at premise indicators. The thing is, be forewarned, you have to make sure that you're using those conclusion and premise or reason indicators correctly in terms of grammar and syntax. Here the word because is used properly in the sentence construction. Because typically tells us a reason is being given for something else. So here we have a reason. So this response does have an argument. It's technically correct in terms of there being an argument. There is a reason given in support of a conclusion. There's 2 statements. There you go. And then the problem is that these other statements are irrelevant. So we don't need irrelevant statements. We don't need merely contextual information. So be careful. Don't think like, this is not, when you're responding in foundational writing assignments and doing your argument constructions, I would write this down. Don't think of what you have to do in an essay. I'm not asking, unless otherwise stated, you're not giving me a context. You're not giving me background information. Don't give that in this argument. Giving context and background information is great for an essay. And if I were to have you write that traditional essay, I would ask in your intro paragraph or in your second paragraph for context or background information. But we're doing something much more specific, okay? We're just writing a paragraph-long argument in response to a contemporary moral problem or contemporary or social or political issue. All right, so that's all I have to say about that example. All right, so in this video, we're going to look at one more argument, and then I'll have a separate video for looking at two more. These are going to be really crucial for some of you. In fact, all of these can be crucial because I'm going to directly tie all of these correct examples to the actual an example of a prompt that you'll get in the foundational writing assignment, and you'll want to be able to look at these as examples. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the last correct response for what is called a definite position. You might want to underline that. That means that person definitely has an opinion on the matter, on a topic. They're not lacking certainty. They have a definite idea of what they believe. They're not wishy-washy. They're not lacking information. They don't doubt what they believe. And we'll talk more about that later as we work through the sample prompt and the actual topics in the foundational writing assignment. So here we've got my conclusion is that we should reopen elementary schools for on-campus learning. So there's a statement. Because children are not learning social skills when having to just sit and do work in front of a computer for hours at a time, 5 days a week. All right, so you can see that the beginning of this response is very similar to this response. Statement 2 is almost the same, except that they added a little bit more detail. Statement 2 is really great because it makes the conclusion more compelling because they're stressing how much time each day somebody, a student, a child is in front of a computer or, a teenager or whatnot. So statement 2 is a little bit more compelling than statement 2 in this example is a little bit more compelling in statement 2. So you want your reasons to be compelling, to be convincing in terms of adequately supporting as much as possible conclusion. And statement 2 here does a better job than this shorter version here. Also notice that in this one, they said, I have concluded that. Here's is another variation. My conclusion is that, right? All right, so here they're still using because as a reason indicator. Now let's look at what they have in the remainder of this response. So we have statement 3, losing the opportunity to develop social skills harms their overall development. And of course, they're talking about children or K through 12 people with the word there. Then they have 4. It is wrong to harm children, okay? And then they have, it stands to reason that we should reopen the schools. So we're going to learn about bracketing and numbering later, and you'll learn why I put brackets in a certain place and you're actually going to do this in the future. You're not going to bracket and number stuff in your foundational writing assignment. You should write that as a warning. You will not bracket and number in your foundational writing assignment. This is just for teaching purposes. But you will do that later when you do something called argument analysis. Okay, so we already know that this is a conclusion because of this argument and how similar this one is, and that this is a reason. What about statements 3, 4, and 5? How did these statements stack up compared to statements 3, 4, and 5 in this example? Well, this one talks about a lost opportunity in terms of child development, and that seems relevant to opening on-campus learning, because we know that on-campus learning in elementary is supposed to do what? Teach those social skills. Now, that isn't actually a missing premise. There is that missing link. They needed to add in this argument that, elementary school is a place where students develop social skills. But that's okay. I'm not grading. I'm not strictly grading on whether there's adequate support for your conclusion. I'm grading on, did you construct an argument? And did you give reasons that are relevant to supporting your conclusion as true or plausible? So that is definitely logically relevant to supporting their conclusion. So this is a reason. Okay, and the author has given, seems to believe that he might or she might be giving reasons. And when I use my college level reading skills, or I use the reading skills that I'm supposed to have to be in this class, I see that more reasons being given. Since is a typical reason indicator. And as it turns out, when I look at the content for statement 4, I see that it is logically relevant to supporting the truth of the conclusion or the plausibility of the conclusion. It stands to reason is also a typical reason indicator. And again, when I use the reading skills that I'm supposed to have for this class, I look at the content of statement 5 and I look at everything else that's been said. I can see that the content in terms of the claim being made in statement 5 is logically relevant to supporting the truth or the plausibility of the conclusion. And so this is another reason. Okay. Now, using these indicators, using reason indicators and conclusion indicators, you might want to write this as a warning. Just putting those words in front of a statement doesn't make or guarantee that your statement really is a conclusion or a premise. But if your statement is a reason or a conclusion and you use a reason or a conclusion indicator, then that just helps to make it that much easier for me to grade and evaluate and see that you did what you're supposed to do, but it'll also make it easier for you and your peers in the future, as I have iterated many times. So here we have an example of a response that is an argument, right? It meets all of the criteria, has at least 2 statements, at least 1 statement attempts to support another. Again, you can see why I said at least 1 statement. In the argument definition, it says a set of statements where at least 1 is given to support another statement, a conclusion. So at least 1 is given in support of a conclusion. And then for the reasoning part, there has to be at least 1 reason. Is there at least 1 reason? Yes, there's 4 reasons. So you can see how important tiny words like that are and will be in this class. To say at least, that's a very important word. So throughout the semester, pay attention to when words like only, all, any, many, some, at least, at most, exact. These are really important words that you have to pay attention to make sure that you form an accurate understanding of a claim being made about anything. All right, so that concludes our examples for this page of this handout. One more video, go over 2 more examples that you may actually draw heavily from when constructing your responses to your particular topic for your class.